So after a strong green trading day for Tesla, today we had a red day. But if we take a look at it, we see that Tesla did push up in the beginning of today's trading session and then ended up closing down by about 1%. Now this price action is in sync with what I've shared on this channel before about September historically being a month of a ton of volatility. Now we have to understand that, historical price action is not indicative of future performance. We have to understand that it just so happens that so far in September, we've got what we typically get in September, a lot of choppiness and also a lot of big swings. Now, typically this is because a lot of European fund managers, they take off in August. So August is usually a light trading month. And when they come back in, they rebalance their portfolio. Also, you have mutual funds that end their fiscal year. So there's a lot of rebalancing taking place in the overall markets. However, one thing you have to understand is that you just can't gauge the market based off seasonality, as that would be imbecilic. You have to be able to navigate on what's actually happening and look at the data. Now, one thing we have to understand is that although so far it's been a choppy September, it doesn't mean that opportunity isn't around the corner. For example, today in the Push and Profit private group at 9:29 a.m. before the market opened, I said for Apple, I'm looking into shorting the shares or getting 177.5 puts once the price is greater than 179.95. Now, if we take a look at Apple today, we see that there were some pretty solid trades, as every single time Apple hit a price target, it pretty much sold off, yielding some great returns. Now, you may have seen that I also talked about Meta this morning, talking about going long on the shares or getting 300 calls once the price is above 297.35. But unfortunately, when we take a look at Meta today, it didn't hit our target entry until the last 5 minutes of the day. And so pretty much there was no trade that we could take off from the trade idea that I talked about this morning. Now, the reason I share this is because there's always opportunity at every corner, regardless of what type of market we're in, regardless if you're looking at things in the short term or even looking at things in the long term. Now, with that being said about September being a choppy month, I don't expect Tesla to have a huge amount of selling pressure and basically capitulate just in the month of September, because there's not a lot of data that could really move Tesla stock besides next week's CPI report, and then of course September 20th when we have the FOMC rate decision. However, I want us to take a look at something else. For example, last month on August 15th, I said the Vietnamese electric company VinFast went public via special purpose acquisition company, which is a SPAC, currently valued at $78 billion. VinFast has sold approximately 1,000 electric cars so far this year. Remarkably, its valuation surpasses that of Ford, Lucid, Rivian, and General Motors. Ticker symbol is VFS. And, I said that you currently can't short it at that time in August, but it reminds me of ticker symbol DWAC, which was another special purpose acquisition company. Now, if we take a look at this electric vehicle company 10 days after I shared that message in the Push and Profit private group, we saw that although there was a lot of hype and it was rallying up, it pretty much retraced all the way back down. Now, the reason I share this with you guys is because although we may have some selling pressure if we get some bad economic data going into this month, I don't expect Tesla to sell off drastically or capitulate, as its valuation is somewhat reasonable, right? It's not like a company that just sold a few cars and is trading at an absurd valuation. We already saw Tesla stock sell off aggressively after the last earnings, and we know that we don't get any fundamental updates on Tesla until next month with the delivery numbers. But with that being said, I want to go ahead and hop into my laptop and talk about Tesla stock from a technical approach and really just cover it from the perspective of a long-term investor and also from the perspective of a short-term trader. But before we go ahead and hop into my laptop, make sure to check out the links in the comment section below, because there's going to be a pinned comment right over here just sharing a link to my free weekly market pulse insights. Again, it's completely free, so definitely check out the links in the comment section below. Alrighty, so we are officially in my laptop taking a look at Tesla stock at a daily time frame, and so far what we've seen is in sync with what we typically see in September, where there's a lot of volatility and a lot of choppiness. We see these big moves up, big moves down, then we see up, then down, then up, then down. I mean, it's pretty much in sync with September. Now, I do want to warn you guys that you can't just assume that every single September for the rest of eternity, the markets are going to perform like this, right? It's just something that you want to be aware of, but it's not something that you absolutely have to believe is going to happen every single time. I'm sure there's going to be a September sometime in the future where it has a one directional move where it may move directionally up or directionally down. It just so happens that this September is falling in line with what we typically see in Septembers, right? Now, let's go ahead and talk about a couple of things with Tesla. So, I talked about how I don't believe Tesla is going to sell off aggressively in September. As fundamentally, Tesla is a decently sound company in terms of where it's currently valued at, right? It's not like where I pointed out earlier, VinFast, which was an electric car company that barely sold any electric cars, that was trading at an absurd price. And that's why I said, hey, this is most likely going to fall down hard. And what did we see? We saw VinFast fall aggressively down. I mean, it's insane how hard it fell down. And so this is not a move that I expect with Tesla, right? I said this reminds me of DWAC, which if you guys don't know, I talked about DWAC a long time ago on this channel. It was a special purpose acquisition company as well. And let's go ahead and zoom out to see what ended up happening. I mean, very similar. We had DWAC move upwards. I mean, let me get rid of all these lines. And it just pushed aggressively upwards. And at the time, this company didn't even have the app, which was Truth Social. It didn't even have the engineers for the app. And so I was calling this out saying that this is not going to be a stock that's going to perform well. I mean, it's not even fundamentally sound. There's no revenue coming in, and eventually it did come down. So you see that eventually companies do end up retracing to their fundamentals. I mean, I could go on with a whole bunch of SPACs. We could talk about SPCE, Virgin Galactic, etc. I mean, the list goes on, right? The case with Tesla is that it's different, right? Why is it different? Well, we're seeing that, yeah, last quarter we saw profit margins compress a bit. And that's, somewhat of an issue, especially if you're an investor, because, yeah, Wall Street looks at things quarter to quarter, and Wall Street didn't like that move obviously they didn't like that in the earnings. Of course, the forward guidance didn't sound too good with Elon Musk about, the upgrades in the factories. But if you're a long-term investor in Tesla, right, this is honestly not too bad, because we're seeing that Tesla has this pricing power where, yeah, it's lowering prices. That's not good. That's hurting profit margins, right? And they're doing this to obviously stir up demand. Why are they trying to stir up demand? Shouldn't people trying to buy Teslas? Well, no, right? Why? They kind of have to do this, right? Why? Well, we see that auto interest rates are at these absurd amounts. I mean, I think even with in a video I did about a month ago, I said even with good credit, I think your interest rate on the auto loan is 7,000. And so if you're looking to buy a new vehicle, it's very tough, right? It's just no incentive to actually buy a new vehicle at this time, right? Same thing with the housing market. I'm not going to go on that topic, but we see that housing sales have slowed down drastically. Why? Well, the 10-year treasury is up. We see that the federal fund rate is at a generational high, and so that's why we're seeing housing also slow down. And so going back on Tesla, yeah, the pricing power that Elon Musk has on Tesla, right, by cutting these prices, it's going to hurt short-term profits. But what else does it do, right? It puts a lot of pressure on the other EV companies, especially the legacy automakers, because they cannot afford to lower their prices. They are already unprofitable. And so they don't have the infrastructure of Tesla. And if they lower their prices, it's going to hurt them even more and drive more. Tesla's just so far ahead of the lead in terms of what they already have with the delivery sales, right? I mean, we talked about a couple of months ago, GM having to revise their deliveries, or not even the deliveries, but manufacturing of some of their vehicles until the next year, right? They're falling down on their projections. And so this is why I'm bullish on Tesla. Fundamentally, yeah, right now it's a tough time in the economy. This is why I always point to the economic data. But going into the long term, right, until 2024, halfway in the year, I believe that once we start seeing the Feds cut rates, and of course at that time it's going to be a little bit too late. We're going to have this tough economic season where they did it too late, right? I mean, they hiked up way too late back in 2021, and now they're probably going to hold down rates for a little bit too long, although inflation's a little bit of a battle. And so what we're probably going to see is, yeah, things are going to get weak in the first half of 2024 with the consumer. But as we start progressing into the second half of 2024 and 2025, I believe that long-term Tesla is going to be an insane, just return for those that are, patient, right? But in the meanwhile, yeah, if we're trading Tesla in the short term, if you're looking at things from a short term perspective, it could be a little bit challenging, right? That's why if you're someone who doesn't like trading with this much volatility and all these swings, then perhaps you want to sit out in the market. Although there's some traders that absolutely love these types of moments in the market where let's go ahead and look at a 5-minute view where the day before we have great news, Tesla moves upwards, and then today we pretty much just sell off. Although we have to understand that Tesla didn't close relatively too far from the day prior. If we go ahead and map it out, Tesla is only about 1.5% down, so it's not too bad. And so one of the things I've been saying is I do expect some more relief, not only with Tesla, but with the overall markets as we get closer to CPI day and we get closer to the federal fund rate decision. Why? Well, it's highly anticipated that the Feds are most likely going to pause, and I believe that the markets are going to obviously see that as a bullish catalyst event. And then the next thing that the markets are going to look for is when or what the Feds are going to be doing next, right? Because there's some fears that the Feds may hike going into the next meeting after September. But as we go into the end of September, having that pause, that's going to provide some optimism for the markets, right? Let's go ahead and take a look at the overall S&P 500 real quick, right? We saw that things sold off, and in the Push and Profit private group, I said that, hey, it's going to be a little bit tough, especially, yesterday I talked about how in the pre-markets and the after hours, we sold off a bit with that news with Apple talking about how in China, we're having some bans on these Apple products, and that's why I was a bit bearish on Apple for today hitting these levels, right? So if you're someone who enjoys scalping and taking advantage of the short-term trades, then this is actually a fun time where you can take advantage of that. But if that's not your forte, that's not something you like doing, and you like waiting for those long directional moves, then again, perhaps you may want to sit out until things have a little bit more clarity. But in terms of Tesla, I do believe that we're going to be seeing some more relief. One of the things I've been covering with the Push for Profit private group is to pay attention to oil prices and then also the United States dollar, because we're seeing oils tick or just crude oil tick up slightly, and that's going to provide some inflationary pressures, while at the same time the US dollar looks like it may be hitting some sort of resistance, trending downwards, and that could also cause some inflationary pressures. And if you have those two inflationary pressures working together, well, what does that do? That causes the 10-year to go up, and when the 10-year treasury goes up, well, that drains liquidity from the markets, which could provide more downturn for the overall market. So short term, I do expect Tesla to continue moving upwards, but again, I don't think that just September is going to go up and break into new highs and things are going to be great. No, like I said, it's a very short-term relief that I do see for the markets going until October, November, and December. I don't think it's going to be that great. A lot of the economic data that we're seeing, honestly, is not great news. And again, have to be data dependent. But today was a very light day for the markets in the sense that there wasn't any tremendously strong economic data. Today we had the consumer credit report coming out, but it wasn't anything that was drastically concerning or just bullish for the markets. So we'll have to play things out ear to ear. As always, I always recommend to stay data dependent and look out for what's going on, right? Don't just look at the charts. Don't just look at the fundamentals. Look at everything and piece it all together to get a better understanding. Why is Tesla cutting their prices? Well, things are not looking good from an economical standpoint, and this is what they have to do. But if you're a long-term investor, this is going to, patience is going to reward you very well, especially if we see this uptrend with EVs ticking upwards as far as consumers buying into EVs year after year going up. But with that said, again, I don't want to make this video any much more longer than it needs to be. Hopefully you guys found some utility in this video. It's a little bit more scattered than other videos, but I'll see you guys on this next video right over here where I break down the 3 stages of a reversal. See you guys. Take care.